You want to know what makes some people mentally unbreakable? It's not genetics. It's not luck. It's not some pretty mindset quote you saved on your phone and never lived by. It's something far more dangerous. It's the ability to operate on a frequency most people can't tolerate. And that scares weak men because anything they can't understand, they try to mock, label, or ignore. Here's the truth that makes people uncomfortable. Mentally unbreakable men don't think like the crowd, don't speak like the crowd, and don't even process reality the same way. Their internal language is different. Their self-talk is different. Their rules are different. While everyone else is translating life through fear and emotion, these men are running a private operating system. You hear noise, they hear signals. Most people are trapped in ordinary language. Complaints, excuses, emotional reactions. That language programs weakness. Now imagine stepping beyond that. Speaking in tongues isn't religion. It's power. It's when your internal dialogue stops being emotional and starts being intentional. It's when you talk to yourself in commands, not questions. When your mind speaks in discipline, not doubt. That's a different tongue, and most men never learn it. When a man develops that internal language, he becomes dangerous. Not loud, not chaotic, controlled, focused, cold. He doesn't need motivation because his inner voice doesn't negotiate. It issues orders. Wake up, train, work, endure. Execute, no discussion. That's how identity shifts. You stop being someone who tries. You become someone who does. Weak men hear this and panic. They want comfort. They want reassurance. They want someone to tell them they're doing fine. Mentally unbreakable men don't want comfort. They want control. They want mastery over their impulses, their emotions, their time. And that control starts with how they speak internally. If your inner language is sloppy, your life will be sloppy. This is why pressure doesn't break them. Pain doesn't shake them. Chaos doesn't distract them. Their internal tongue doesn't change based on mood or circumstance. It stays dominant. When things get hard, their mind doesn't scream. It tightens. It sharpens. It goes silent and lethal. That's discipline at the highest level. Here's the part nobody wants to accept. You can't fake this. You can't borrow it. You can't read it in a book and suddenly have it. You earn it through repetition, suffering, and refusing to betray your own standards. Every time you obey weakness, your internal language softens. Every time you endure, it hardens. Most men are trapped inside a weak internal language, and they don't even realize it. Every outcome in your life is shaped by how you speak to yourself when no one is watching. Not what you say out loud, not what you post online, what runs silently in your head. And for most people, that inner voice is chaotic, emotional, undisciplined, and soft. It asks questions instead of giving orders. It negotiates with discomfort. It looks for exits when pressure shows up. That kind of internal language produces fragile men by default. Mentally unbreakable men operate differently. Their mind does not sound like a conversation. It sounds like a command center. Short, direct, non-emotional. There is no debate. When action is required, the instruction is issued and execution follows immediately. No self-pity, no internal drama, no overthinking. This is not confidence. This is control. Confidence can shake. Control does not. Listen carefully to how weak men think. I don't feel like it. I'll start tomorrow. I need motivation. That language programs hesitation. It trains the brain to associate action with comfort. Now compare that to the internal language of a dominant man. Do it. Move, finish, endure. That language does not care how you feel. It only cares about outcome. And over time, the brain adapts. It stops resisting. It stops complaining. It starts obeying. This is why mentally unbreakable men look calm in chaos. Their internal language doesn't spike emotionally when pressure increases. It narrows. It becomes sharper. When most people panic internally, these men simplify. When most people get louder in their head, these men get quieter. Silence is not weakness. Silence is clarity, and clarity is power. Your inner language determines your identity. If you constantly explain yourself internally, you become someone who needs justification. If you constantly comfort yourself internally, you become someone who avoids pain. If you constantly command yourself internally, you become someone who acts regardless of fear. Identity is not something you decide once. It is reinforced every day by the tone of your internal voice. This is why motivation is useless for men who want dominance. Motivation speaks the language of emotion. Emotion is unstable. It comes and goes. Command language is stable. It does not depend on mood, weather, or validation. When a man trains his internal language to be authoritative, his behavior follows automatically. He no longer needs external pressure. He becomes self-governed. Most people will never reach this level because it requires killing parts of yourself. The part that wants sympathy, the part that wants excuses, the part that wants comfort before results. That internal voice has to be stripped down and rebuilt, and that process is uncomfortable. It feels harsh. It feels cold. That's why most quit. They mistake softness for humanity and discipline for cruelty. But the truth is simple. The world does not respond to intentions. It responds to execution. And execution comes from command, not conversation. Once your internal language shifts, your behavior becomes predictable. You do what you say. You finish what you start. You don't need reminders. You don't need pep talks. You don't need approval. When a man reaches that point, he becomes mentally unbreakable, not because he is fearless, but because fear no longer has voting rights. The internal language has already decided, and when the mind stops asking for permission, nothing outside can control it. Most men misunderstand discipline because they treat it like an action they occasionally perform instead of a language they live inside. They think discipline is something you do when you feel motivated, when the timing feels right, when conditions are comfortable. That misunderstanding alone keeps them average. Discipline is not behavior. It is the way your mind speaks to itself before behavior even exists. Pay attention to how undisciplined men think. Their inner voice is emotional, scattered, and constantly bargaining. It asks for permission. It searches for relief. It waits to feel ready. That internal dialect is unstable. It collapses under stress. The moment resistance appears, that language starts negotiating exits. And once negotiation begins, execution dies. Disciplined men speak a harder internal language. There is no negotiation, no emotional commentary, no excuses disguised as logic. The instruction is issued and the body follows. Not because it feels good, but because that is the rule. This is why discipline looks boring from the outside. There is no drama, no hype, just repetition, just compliance. This internal dialect is built through repetition under discomfort. Every time you act without feeling ready, the language strengthens. Every time you wait for motivation, it weakens. Over time, your mind learns what kind of voice it must respond to. If you speak softly to yourself, your mind becomes lazy. If you speak firmly, it becomes efficient. This is conditioning, not inspiration. The reason most men fail to develop discipline is because they still speak to themselves like they need to be convinced. They explain, they justify, they comfort. That tone signals weakness. Your mind interprets that as uncertainty. And when uncertainty exists, action is delayed. Discipline requires certainty. Certainty comes from authority. Authority comes from a firm internal voice. Once this dialect is established, discipline stops feeling heavy. It becomes automatic. You don't argue with yourself about waking up early. You don't debate whether to train or work. You don't waste energy deciding. Decisions were already made by the system you built. This is freedom, not doing whatever you want, but being free from internal chaos. Men who lack discipline are mentally noisy. Their thoughts are loud, emotional, reactive. Disciplined men are quiet inside. Silence replaces clutter. Focus replaces distraction. That silence is not emptiness. It is alignment. When the mind speaks in one clear voice, the body follows without resistance. This is why discipline creates dominance. A man who can command himself does not need external control. He doesn't need deadlines, threats, or supervision. He governs his own actions, and self-governance is the foundation of power. Without it, everything else collapses. The process is unforgiving. You will feel harsh with yourself at first. You will feel like you're denying parts of who you are. That's because you are. You are denying the undisciplined identity that kept you weak. Growth does not feel kind. It feels exact. It feels demanding. And that's the point. Over time, this internal dialect reshapes your standards. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes expected. Discipline stops being something you force and becomes something you are. Not because you are special, but because you trained your internal language to respect authority. And once your mind learns to obey, it never forgets. Pressure doesn't create weakness, it exposes it. When life tightens, when expectations rise, when consequences become real, every man is forced to reveal the true structure of his mind. Most people believe they'll rise to the occasion. That's fantasy. You don't rise under pressure. You fall to the level of your internal order. And for most men, that order is chaos pretending to be confidence. Watch how average men behave when pressure hits. Their thoughts scatter. Their emotions spike. Their inner voice becomes loud, dramatic, reactive. They rush decisions. They over-explain. They complain internally while pretending to stay strong on the outside. That internal noise is not stress. It's lack of hierarchy. There is no clear authority inside their mind, so every impulse fights for control. Mentally unbreakable men experience the same pressure, but their internal response is the opposite. Their mind doesn't explode. It compresses. Thoughts become fewer, not more. The internal voice lowers instead of rising. This isn't calmness learned from breathing exercises. This is dominance built through structure. When pressure increases, the chain of command inside their head becomes clearer. Pressure is the ultimate audit. It reveals who is in charge internally. In weak men, emotions take over. Fear speaks first. Doubt argues second. Excuses rush in to protect the ego. In strong men, none of that gets airtime. The internal hierarchy is fixed. Logic commands. Discipline enforces. Emotion obeys or gets ignored. This is why some men perform better when everything is on the line. They don't see pressure as a threat. They see it as clarity. When stakes rise, distractions disappear. Comfort is removed. The mind is forced into essentials. That environment favors men who already live with internal order. For everyone else, it feels like drowning. Most men think pressure breaks them because they've never trained their mind to function without comfort. Their internal structure depends on stability, praise, and predictability. Remove those, and the system collapses. Mentally unbreakable men are built in instability. Their internal hierarchy was forged when things were hard, uncertain, and unforgiving. Pressure doesn't surprise them. It feels familiar. Under pressure, weak men seek relief. Strong men seek precision. Weak men want the feeling to stop. Strong men want the task completed. That difference is not talent. It's conditioning. The mind learns what to prioritize based on what you've reinforced over time. If you trained yourself to escape discomfort, pressure exposes that instantly. This is where most self-image illusions die. Men who think they are disciplined discover they are emotional. Men who think they are focused realize they are fragile. Pressure strips away the stories you tell yourself and leaves only behavior. That's why most people avoid it. Pressure is honest. It doesn't care about potential or intention. Internally dominant men don't rush under pressure. They slow down. They narrow attention. They remove unnecessary movement. Their decisions become deliberate. This isn't confidence theater. It's operational efficiency. The mind stops wasting energy on reaction and redirects it toward execution. Pressure also reveals who needs external validation. When things get heavy, weak men look for reassurance, approval, or someone to blame. Strong men look inward and tighten control. Their reference point is internal. They don't need agreement to move. They don't need applause to act. If pressure currently overwhelms you, that's not bad luck. That's feedback. It's showing you that your internal hierarchy is undeveloped. Fixing that doesn't happen by avoiding pressure. It happens by stepping into it repeatedly until your mind learns who is in charge. Once that hierarchy is established, pressure loses its power to destabilize. It becomes a signal, not a threat. And when a man reaches that level, chaos outside no longer creates chaos inside. Most men live inside an identity built on explanation. They explain why they're tired. They explain why the timing isn't right. They explain why they could have done better if circumstances were different. That constant internal explaining feels intelligent, but it's a trap. Explanation is a defense mechanism for weakness. It protects the ego from reality while quietly destroying progress. The moment a man starts explaining himself, he hands over authority. He is no longer acting from certainty. He is seeking permission. From himself, from others, from conditions. That's the identity of someone who reacts to life instead of shaping it. Mentally dominant men don't waste energy explaining their behavior. They don't need to justify discipline. They don't need to narrate their struggle. They move and the results speak. Excuses are not always obvious. Sometimes they sound logical. Sometimes they sound responsible. Sometimes they even sound mature. I need to plan more. I need to understand myself better. I'll do it when I'm in the right headspace. All of that is avoidance wearing a suit. Execution doesn't need perfect conditions. It needs obedience. When excuses die, something uncomfortable happens. Silence, no story to hide behind. No emotional padding. Just a clear view of what needs to be done and whether or not you're doing it. Most men avoid that silence because it removes their alibi. Without excuses, failure becomes personal. And that level of ownership terrifies people who are attached to comfort. An identity shift only happens when excuses are no longer allowed to speak, not reduced, not managed, eliminated. The internal dialogue changes from, "Why is this hard?" to "Do it anyway." That shift is violent. It feels like betraying the old version of yourself. And in a way it is. Growth demands that the weaker identity dies. This is why most men stay stuck in potential. Potential is safe. Potential allows excuses. Reality does not. Reality is execution. Reality is measurable. Reality doesn't care about intention. When you move into execution, you lose the ability to lie to yourself. And that's where real identity is formed. Mentally unbreakable men are not special. They are ruthless with excuses. They don't tolerate internal narratives that reduce standards. They don't entertain self-pity disguised as reflection. When something isn't done, they don't ask why in an emotional sense. They ask what failed operationally and fix it. No drama, no guilt, just correction. This creates a powerful internal shift. The mind stops seeing itself as a victim of circumstances and starts seeing itself as the source of outcomes. Responsibility increases. So does pressure. But with that pressure comes authority. A man who accepts full responsibility gains full control. That's the trade most people are unwilling to make. The death of excuses also kills the need for external validation. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop seeking agreement. You stop caring whether others understand your process. Your standards become internal. That's dangerous in the best way. It makes you immune to opinions. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't derail you. You move based on principle, not reaction. At first, this identity feels harsh. There is no emotional safety net, no one to blame, no comforting narrative. But over time, it becomes grounding. You trust yourself because you no longer negotiate with weakness. You say you'll do something and it gets done. That consistency builds a quiet confidence that can't be faked. Men who refuse to kill excuses stay trapped in cycles of motivation and burnout. Men who eliminate excuses build momentum. Momentum reshapes identity. Identity reshapes destiny. And it all starts the moment a man decides that explanation is no longer acceptable and execution is the only language allowed. Most men run from pain because they were taught it's a signal to stop. That belief alone disqualifies them from ever becoming mentally unbreakable. Pain is not a warning. Pain is information. It tells you exactly where you are weak, undisciplined, untrained, or dishonest with yourself. And what you do with that information determines whether pain destroys you or rebuilds you. Weak men experience pain and immediately try to escape it. They numb it, distract from it, rationalize it. They look for relief instead of meaning. That reaction trains the mind to associate discomfort with danger. Over time, the nervous system becomes fragile. Any resistance feels overwhelming. Any challenge feels personal. Pain becomes something to fear. Strong men respond differently. Pain gets their attention, not their emotions. They don't dramatize it. They analyze it. They ask one question. What is this teaching me? That shift alone changes everything. Pain stops being an enemy and becomes a tool, a training stimulus, a sharpening mechanism. Every time a man endures pain without breaking his standards, something subtle happens internally. His tolerance increases. His internal voice hardens. His emotional reactions lose volume. The mind learns that discomfort is survivable, then manageable, then familiar. Eventually, pain stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like structure. This is how pain programs strength. Not by being intense, but by being repeated and survived. Sudden pain shocks people. Sustained pain transforms them. Men who build mental dominance don't look for extreme suffering. They look for consistent discomfort. Early mornings, hard training, long hours, delayed gratification. These aren't dramatic. They're relentless. And that's why they work. Pain also strips illusions. When things hurt, your real priorities surface. You find out what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not. Most men discover they love comfort more than progress. That realization either breaks them or changes them. There is no neutral outcome. Men who use pain as programming don't complain internally. Complaining weakens the signal. It turns pain into victimhood. Instead, they stay neutral, observant, focused. Pain becomes background noise while the task remains central. This trains the mind to separate sensation from decision-making. And that separation is power. Over time, this creates a dangerous advantage. While others panic under discomfort, you remain functional. While others lose discipline, when things get hard, yours tightens. Pain stops dictating behavior. It becomes irrelevant to execution. That's when a man becomes hard to control, because most control systems rely on discomfort to enforce obedience. There's a reason mentally unbreakable men often appear emotionally detached. It's not because they feel less. It's because they've trained their nervous system not to overreact. They've been exposed to enough discomfort that emotional spikes no longer hijack behavior. Calm under pressure isn't personality, it's conditioning. Pain also builds trust with yourself. Every time you endure something difficult without quitting, your self-respect increases. Not confidence, respect. You know who you are because you've seen yourself under strain. That knowledge is unshakable. No praise can inflate it. No criticism can erase it. Men who avoid pain live in constant doubt. They don't know how they'll react when things get hard because they've never tested themselves. That uncertainty breeds anxiety. Men who embrace pain have certainty. They've already been there. They've already survived. There's nothing theoretical about it. Pain doesn't automatically make you stronger. That's a lie. Pain only strengthens men who refuse to let it lower their standards. If pain makes you softer, bitter, or resentful, it's because you let it. But if pain makes you precise, disciplined, and focused, then it's doing exactly what it's meant to do. In the end, pain is the great divider. It exposes who seeks comfort and who seeks growth, who wants relief and who wants dominance. The men who understand this don't chase pain, but they don't run from it either. They let it do its work. And over time, it builds something most people never develop: a mind that does not fold. Most men think dominance is loud. They think it's aggression, control over others, or being the most visible presence in the room. That belief exposes inexperience. Real dominance is quiet, internal, and ruthless. It starts with self-control. If you cannot command your own impulses, emotions, and reactions, you are not powerful. You are predictable. And anything predictable can be controlled. Look closely at men who lack self-control. They react instantly. Anger controls them. Pleasure distracts them. Comfort sedates them. Their behavior is driven by whatever stimulus hits hardest in the moment. They believe they are choosing, but they are being pulled. Every impulse has authority over them. That is not freedom. That is slavery with the illusion of choice. Men with self-control move differently. They pause where others react. They delay where others rush. They observe where others explode. That pause is not hesitation. It is command. In that space, they decide instead of respond. Decision is power. Reaction is weakness. Self-control is dominance because it removes leverage from the world. When insults don't provoke you, you cannot be manipulated. When pleasure doesn't distract you, you cannot be derailed. When fear doesn't rush you, you cannot be pressured. Every time you resist an impulse, you reclaim authority over your behavior. Over time, that authority compounds. Most men avoid this because self-control feels restrictive at first. It feels like denial. It feels like tension. But what they don't understand is that lack of self-control is far more restrictive. It traps you in cycles of regret, distraction, and recovery. You spend your life cleaning up after your own impulses. Self-controlled men don't feel less. They feel precisely. Emotion doesn't disappear. It gets regulated. Anger becomes focus. Desire becomes drive. Fear becomes alertness. Nothing is wasted. Everything is channeled. That's efficiency at the psychological level. This is why self-control creates presence. When a man isn't leaking energy through reaction, people feel it. He doesn't need to speak much. His stillness communicates authority. His restraint signals confidence. People trust men who are not easily moved because stability feels safe and dangerous at the same time. There is also a brutal truth most men avoid. If you cannot control yourself, you will always resent those who can. You will call them cold, detached, or arrogant. That resentment is just projection. Deep down, you know they possess something you don't. And instead of earning it, you criticize it. Self-control is built in private. No one sees the moments you choose discipline over comfort. No one applauds restraint. No one rewards silence. That's why most men never develop it. There is no immediate validation. The payoff is delayed but absolute. Over time, your word becomes reliable. Your actions become consistent. Your identity solidifies. Once a man reaches that point, external dominance becomes irrelevant. He doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't need to posture. He doesn't need to win arguments. He already won the hardest battle, himself. That victory changes how he walks, speaks, and decides. Men without self-control chase power. Men with self-control attract it. Opportunities trust them. Pressure sharpens them. Responsibility finds them. Not because they demand it, but because they can carry it. This is the final hierarchy. Men ruled by impulse at the bottom. Men ruled by emotion above them. Men ruled by principle at the top. Self-control is what moves you upward. Strip it away, and no amount of confidence, strength, or ambition will save you. Build it, and nothing external can truly threaten you. So if you're not mentally unbreakable yet, don't lie to yourself. You haven't earned that tongue. You're still speaking the language of comfort. And that's fine if you're okay staying average. But if you want dominance, control, and an unshakable mind, you need to evolve the way you speak to yourself. Because once your internal language changes, the world doesn't control you anymore. You control yourself. And a man who controls himself cannot be broken.